I wasn't angry. I didn't shout. I didn't even cry when I saw her with him in our bedroom. The place where we laughed, made plans, whispered dreams in the dark. Something inside me didn't explode. It just collapsed quietly. That morning started like every other. I kissed her goodbye as she pretended to still be asleep. Whispered that I'd be home early and left to grab her favorite donuts. It was our anniversary. Not the big one, just 7 years. But she used to call it our lucky 7. I thought a surprise breakfast in bed would bring back that spark. She'd seemed distant lately, more glued to her phone, taking more me time, less interested in us. But I didn't want to believe the worst. I should have noticed the signs. The new perfume she never wore for me, the laughter during late-night texts, the locked phone, the girls' nights that didn't add up. But I trusted her. Maybe that was my biggest flaw. I returned home earlier than planned. I even parked down the street so I could sneak in quietly and surprise her. I was still smiling when I opened the front door, carrying the donuts and a bouquet of wildflowers. The house was silent, too silent. Her keys were in the tray. Her heels, the black ones she only wore when she wanted to impress, were by the stairs. I froze. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I crept upstairs, heart pounding. Our bedroom door was half open. Pushed it. There she was, not asleep, not alone. She was laughing. She was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. But it wasn't for me. It was for him. A man I'd never seen before. Shirtless, her body wrapped around his. She didn't see me at first. I stood there frozen, still holding the donuts and flowers like a fool in some tragic play. When she finally noticed me, her smile vanished. She gasped, tried to cover herself, stumbled over some excuse. "It's not what it looks like." Classic. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't show regret. Only panic. Fear of being caught. Of consequences, but not of hurting me. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't beg for answers. I just turned around, walked back down the stairs, dropped the flowers on the counter, and left the house. I didn't take my car. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked. I walked away from the life we built, from the lies, from the weight of being second to someone she barely knew. For a year, I disappeared. No social media, no contact with mutual friends. I changed cities, found work in a place where no one knew my name, rented a small apartment near the coast and lived quietly. She never found me. Not then, not for months, but when she finally did, when she showed up at my door one rainy evening, soaked to the bone and shaking. The look in her eyes wasn't anger or pride or even love. It was pure regret. And that's where the real story begins. The rain had been coming down for hours that night, the kind of steady, cold downpour that soaks into your bones and drowns every thought in gray silence. I was sitting by the window in the small coastal apartment I now called home, watching the water bead and stream down the glass when the knock came. Not loud, not urgent, just hesitant, like someone wasn't sure they deserved to be let in. I hadn't heard that sound in a year. I hadn't spoken her name, hadn't said it out loud even once since the day I vanished. I didn't even know if she was still living in that house we used to share. I never tried to find out. I let the past rot where it belonged, behind me. Or at least I thought I had. When I opened the door, the sight was so surreal it almost didn't register. There she was, Kayla, my wife or whatever she was now. Her hair was plastered to her face, her makeup running, her coat soaked and clinging to her like wet paper. And those eyes, those same pale green eyes that once looked at me with warmth, now stared at me hollowed out, like the soul behind them had been scraped raw. "Trent," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the wind behind her. "Please, don't shut the door." I didn't move, not a single muscle. The only sound was the rain behind her and the faint whistle of the sea beyond the cliffs. It was as if time itself paused, holding its breath. I let her stand there for maybe 30 seconds, maybe longer, just long enough to let her feel it. The unfamiliarity, the silence, the weight of everything she'd thrown away. Then I stepped aside. She didn't run into my arms. She didn't cry or beg or fall to her knees. She just walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she had the right to anymore. And she didn't. Not really. I handed her a towel without a word. She took it like a ghost going through the motions. I watched her from the corner of the room as she dried her hands, her arms trembling. For a while she didn't speak, and neither did I. Then, with her eyes fixed on the floor, she said, "I've been looking for you for months. I didn't know if you were alive." I should have said something cruel. Something like, "You didn't care if I was alive when you were with him." But I didn't. I just waited. Let her unravel at her own pace. "I lost everything," she said. "After you left, it all fell apart. He was just using me for fun." Said he didn't sign up for emotional baggage when I started crying in my sleep. He left within weeks. My parents found out and cut ties. My job went to hell because I couldn't focus. I started drinking, almost totaled my car. I kept seeing your face everywhere, Trent. I couldn't breathe. Her voice cracked. For a moment, I saw something real flash through her. Not the woman who had laughed in our bed with someone else. Not the cold, detached person who said, "It's not what it looks like," but someone shattered. Someone who finally understood what she had destroyed. Still, I said nothing. She finally looked at me, and that's when the tears came. The kind that don't come from sadness, but from shame. She tried to reach out. I stepped back. "I didn't come here expecting anything," she said. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't take back what I did. I just needed to see you to know you were okay. I needed to say I'm sorry." Silence. Then I asked calmly, "Why did you do it?" She hesitated, swallowed hard. "Because I got bored. Because I thought I wanted something exciting again. I thought you'd always be there no matter what. I thought I was the one in control. But I was wrong about everything." That line cut deeper than I expected. Not because it was honest, but because it was pathetic. It wasn't love she lacked. It was character. She destroyed our life for something as fleeting as excitement. I nodded slowly. "I'm not the man you left behind, Kayla. That version of me died a year ago." She tried to speak, but I stopped her. "You don't get to decide what happens next," I said. "Not anymore." Her face twisted, pained. She looked around the room, the unfamiliar walls, the stripped-back furniture, the absence of any trace of our past. It wasn't just a different apartment. It was a different life, one she had no part in. And in that moment, she realized it. Her shoulders dropped. She stood there, soaking in the finality. "I just wanted you to know the truth," she said, "and that I'll regret it until the day I die." Then she turned and, without asking for anything else, she walked back into the rain. But that wasn't the last I saw of her. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Not because her words stirred old feelings. But because something inside me shifted again. A subtle realignment of perspective, like looking at an old wound and seeing for the first time how deep it really goes. She had shown up finally, not to reclaim me, but to confirm something for herself. That I was still standing, that she hadn't broken me beyond repair. And now that she had seen it with her own eyes, she could go back to whatever life she was pretending to rebuild. But 2 days later, she came back. Not with tears, not with excuses, with a box. She was wearing the same coat. But this time it wasn't raining. The ocean wind was sharp and dry, carrying the scent of salt and late spring. I opened the door with no expression on my face. She didn't ask to come in. She just held out the box and said, "I need you to have this. Then I'll leave for good." I took the box. It was heavier than I expected. She turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door, walked into the kitchen, set the box on the counter, and stared at it like it might detonate. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Us in the early days, letters I had written her, drawings we made together for a nursery we never built, mementos of a life that now felt fictional. But under all of it was something else, something that didn't belong to me. A man's wallet and a sealed envelope with my name on it. The wallet was worn. Inside was a license for someone named Raymond Ellis, the man she cheated with, the man I had never met. There was also a key card to a corporate office and a receipt, dated 3 weeks after I disappeared, for a prepaid motel room 2 hours outside our city. I didn't understand. Not yet. The letter was short. Trent, this man destroyed both of us. Not just our marriage, but everything I believed I had control over. You never asked questions, and I admired that. But now I want you to know the truth. Ray was married with a kid. I didn't know at first. By the time I did, it was too late. His wife found out. There was a confrontation. It got ugly. She left him, took everything. He blamed me. He told me he'd ruin me for sport. And he did. He cost me my job. He spread lies. He sent pictures of us to my father. Told my mother I was an escort. He turned my world into a prison. I thought he was my escape from routine. Turns out he was the cage. I kept this all because I wanted revenge. But I'm giving it to you now because you deserve to know it wasn't about you. It never was. I'm sorry. Kay. I don't know how long I sat at that kitchen table. Time didn't mean anything in that moment. I kept staring at the letter, then the wallet, then back at the photos of a couple that didn't exist anymore. And all I could think was she hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to hand me the wreckage she couldn't carry anymore. She wanted to offload her guilt, not fix anything. But her mistake was assuming I still cared enough to feel betrayed. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I logged into an old email I hadn't touched since I left. Dozens of messages, most from Qley in the early months after I vanished. A few from mutual friends who took her side, but one stood out from an unknown address. Subject: he did the same thing to me. The body of the message was brief. You don't know me, but I saw your name in a shared folder Raymond used. I think you were Kayla's husband. I was Raymond's wife. He lied to me, too. I know everything. If you want to talk, I'll tell you what she never will. Attached was a photo of Raymond and Qley. Not in bed, but in an office, his hand on her thigh, her hand holding a folder labeled confidential. This wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger. I stared at the image, then clicked the reply button, and for the first time in a year I typed, "Let's talk." Because whatever I thought I knew about my wife's betrayal was just the surface. Her betrayal had been personal, raw, intimate. But now it was something else, something larger, colder, more calculating. When I hit send on that email reply, I wasn't prepared for what would unfold next. The woman who contacted me, her name was Claire Ellis, responded within an hour. I half expected the email to be a scam, someone fishing for gossip, or playing a cruel trick. But she was real. Too real. Her tone was clinical, exhausted, not vindictive, just done. She didn't want to meet in public. Understandable. Instead, she offered a video call. I agreed. And a few hours later, I was staring into the tired, weathered face of a woman who looked like she'd aged 10 years in one. Claire didn't waste time. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't give the typical, "I'm sorry for what you've gone through." She just pulled out a thick manila folder, showed it to the camera and said, "I've been documenting everything for the divorce. You'll want to see this." What she showed me felt like stepping into a world I didn't know my wife had lived in. Emails, text messages, office surveillance stills, inappropriate meetings, duplicated keycards, and a pattern of deceit so deeply ingrained that I couldn't tell where Qley stopped being a participant and started becoming a pawn. Turns out Raymond wasn't just some random guy my wife stumbled into bed with. He was a senior executive at a pharmaceutical firm that Qley had recently pitched a project to through her old job in product consulting. She wasn't supposed to meet with him privately, but she did several times. It started under the guise of professional, off-the-record dinners, then hotel meetings, then gifts, then silence. Raymond, according to Claire, had done this before multiple times, using his position, targeting married women who were in unhappy relationships or seemed easy to isolate. He'd make them feel important, desired, tell them their husbands were emotionally unavailable, that they deserved better. Then he'd extract favors, access, information, leverage until they either broke or tried to break free, at which point he'd weaponize everything they gave him. And Qley had given him a lot. Not just her body, not just her trust, but company files, trade data, private client proposals that she never should have shared. Claire's face turned stone cold when she said, "He wasn't sleeping with your wife because she was irresistible. He was sleeping with her because she was useful." That line hit me harder than anything Qley had said during her rainy doorstep visit. It reframed everything. I had spent months thinking I was replaced, that I wasn't exciting enough, bold enough, whatever enough. But now it seemed like I was never even part of the equation. Qley wasn't chasing romance. She was chasing validation, power, status. And in doing so, she'd fallen into the arms of a predator who saw her as a means to an end. Claire continued, showing me emails that Qley had sent, stripped of emotion, just raw information. In one, she forwarded a confidential supplier list marked, "Do not circulate." In another, she asked Raymond if he had time to review the adjusted pricing model before it goes public. It wasn't just a fling. It was betrayal on multiple fronts. Marital, ethical, legal. I asked Claire why she was showing me this now. She sighed. Because the courts won't care about your feelings, but they'll care if more people come forward. I think Qley was manipulated, but I also think she knew what she was doing. If she tries to spin this like she was an innocent victim, you deserve the chance to protect yourself. I ended the call in a daze. My hands shook. I didn't feel angry. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved and left nothing but cold ash in its place. Qley had always been ambitious, sharp, confident, but I never imagined she'd fall so deep into someone else's game that she'd forget how much damage she could do just by staying silent. And now she was trying to find me, not because she missed me, but because the walls were closing in on her. The visit, the apology, the box. It wasn't guilt. It was preemptive. It was about softening me before the truth came out. She knew what was coming. And now, so did I. I didn't reach out to her. Not after the email. Not after the call with Claire. Not after the sleepless night I spent pacing around my apartment trying to piece together just how far down the rabbit hole she had gone. But that didn't matter because 3 days later, Qley came back again. This time she wasn't carrying a box or wrapped in rain. This time she looked composed, too composed. Her makeup was perfect. Her clothes carefully chosen, not seductive, strategic. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to negotiate. "I know you spoke to Claire," she said the moment I opened the door. No hesitation, no pleasantries. "And I know what she showed you. I figured you'd put it together eventually, but I was hoping I could talk to you before that happened." I didn't invite her in. I just crossed my arms and leaned against the door frame, letting her squirm in the tension she'd created. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite fear, more like desperation wrapped in pride. The kind that builds when someone realizes their carefully balanced world is beginning to tilt and there's no way to stop the slide. She cleared her throat. "I made a mistake. No, I made several, but I didn't come here to explain those. I came because I need your help." That word "need" hit differently. It wasn't the same as before. It didn't sound like love or longing. It sounded transactional. She wasn't reaching for our past. She was trying to survive her present. I stayed silent, and that made her nervous. "I'm not the same person you left," she continued. "After you disappeared, everything fell apart. Raymond ghosted me. Then his wife filed charges and the company started digging. I thought I could stay quiet, blend in, keep my head down. But now they're talking about a lawsuit, corporate espionage, misuse of client data. They're looking for someone to pin it on." I narrowed my eyes. "And you're afraid it's going to be you?" She didn't respond. She didn't have to. "I gave them your name," she said finally. "Back then, when they asked how he got access to certain files, I said you might have forwarded them by mistake from my work laptop. Panicked. I thought you were gone forever. I thought you'd never hear about it. I didn't expect you to still be reachable." My jaw locked. That wasn't just betrayal. That was calculated self-preservation. She hadn't just destroyed our marriage. She'd offered me up like a shield when the fallout came crashing down. "So, let me get this straight," I said, voice low. "You gave them my name, knowing I had nothing to do with it. Then came here crying in the rain, pretending to apologize while still waiting to see if the lie would stick." She stepped back slightly, as if the truth of what she'd done physically hit her. But she didn't deny it. She just stared at me with eyes that finally looked human again. Not composed, not curated. Scared. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I thought I lost everything. You were gone. I was spiraling. I thought if I blamed you, it would buy me time. And now I'm trying to fix it. You're not trying to fix anything, I snapped. You're trying to not go to prison. A pause. I can recant, she said. I can go to the company and tell them it was a mistake, that I lied, that I panicked. But I need you to back me, to say you forgive me, that I had a breakdown, that I wasn't in my right mind. If you don't, they'll bury me. That was the moment I realized just how far she'd fallen. Not because she was asking for help, but because she still didn't understand that some things can't be undone. She thought this was a math equation. Apology plus explanation equals redemption. But there are equations in life where nothing balances out, where the damage is too deep, too targeted, too irreversible. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I didn't even laugh, though a part of me wanted to. I just looked her in the eye and said, "You buried me once. I rebuilt alone. You buried your career, your name, your integrity. That's on you. I'm not going to lie for you. I won't destroy what I rebuilt to rescue what you wrecked." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to say. "I'll sign anything," she said finally. "A release, a statement, whatever it takes to clear your name. Just don't let me disappear like you did." I closed the door. Not with anger, with clarity. She didn't return after that. But what happened next? That wasn't the end of her story. It was just the start of mine. The days that followed felt strangely calm. There was no explosion, no phone calls, no threats or fallout, just silence. But the kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. It was the silence that settles over scorched earth. The kind that makes you wonder what might still be smoldering underneath. I didn't tell anyone about Kayla's visit. Didn't report her to the company she mentioned. Didn't reach out to Claire again. I didn't need to. It wasn't about revenge anymore. I had outgrown that need. I was past the part of my life where I wanted her to hurt the way she hurt me. The truth is, I just didn't want to carry her anymore. Not in my mind, not in my memory, not even in my hatred. I wanted my future back. And for the first time, I could feel the outlines of it. So, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. Living for myself. I woke up early, not because I had to, because I wanted to. I made coffee and walked along the cliffs behind my apartment, breathing in the sea air like it owed me something. I changed my routines, stopped avoiding places that reminded me of her. I began to let my mind wander into territory I'd locked away, things I used to love before marriage, before betrayal, before I started measuring my worth by someone else's loyalty. I picked up a camera again. I hadn't touched it since the early days of our relationship when I used to photograph city streets, strangers, moments that didn't ask for permission. Somewhere along the way, Kayla had convinced me it was a distraction, that it didn't pay, that it was childish. And I believed her. I stopped creating, started calculating, became practical, predictable, safe. Now holding it again, I felt like a part of me had been in exile and finally found its way back home. That's how I met her. Not Kayla, not someone like her, someone nothing like her. Her name was Marin. She ran the small art gallery near the boardwalk. I passed it 100 times but never gone in. One afternoon, on a whim, I stopped by to look at a photography exhibit posted in the window. She stepped out while I was still staring at a black and white shot of a man alone in a subway car and said, "You can come in, you know, it doesn't bite." She said it with that sort of quiet confidence I wasn't used to anymore. Someone who wasn't performing, wasn't selling, wasn't seeking validation, just being. That was the difference. Inside, we talked. Not about relationships, not about pasts, about light, texture, color theory, what made a photo feel instead of just look good. It was the first time in months, maybe longer, that I didn't feel like I had to defend who I was. Over the next few weeks, I started dropping by more often. She invited me to bring some of my own work in, just to see what it looked like on a wall. I did. She didn't critique it. She asked how it made me feel. And when I struggled to answer, she smiled and said, "That's why you need to keep shooting. The answer always shows up eventually, but only if you do." It wasn't a romance. Not yet. But it was something far rarer. Safety, the kind that doesn't beg for attention or reassurance. It just exists. In the background, the mess Kayla created was slowly unraveling. I heard through Claire weeks later that the company didn't pursue charges. Qley recanted everything formally, admitted to fabricating the involvement. Legally, I was clear. Emotionally, I already had been, but there was one final detail, something I hadn't expected. Claire forwarded me a file. It was part of the investigative audit Raymond's company had initiated. Buried in the records was a message, an encrypted audio clip pulled from a backup server. It was Qley's voice, clear, cold, saying, "He's boring now. Safe. I need fire again, even if it burns." I listened to it once. Then I deleted it because that wasn't about me. That was her confession to herself, and it wasn't my burden anymore. The strange thing about healing is that it never announces itself. It doesn't show up with balloons or closure or some loud declaration that you're officially over the pain. It just creeps in quietly, subtly. One morning, you wake up and realize you didn't think about them the day before or the day before that. Then, before you even notice it's happening, you start thinking about other things, like what kind of light you want in your kitchen or where you left the book you always meant to finish. That's how it was for me. The world didn't shift overnight, but it did shift. Slowly, day by day. Marin had something to do with it, sure, but she wasn't the reason I was getting better. She was just the person I happened to meet once I started reclaiming myself. That's what made it different. She wasn't saving me. She was witnessing me as I figured out how to come back to life. We never talked about Qley. I never brought it up and Marin never asked. There was an unspoken rule between us. Whatever story we had before didn't matter now. What counted was how we showed up now. In silence, in color, in small shared rituals that meant nothing on the surface but everything underneath. She started joining me on morning walks. Sometimes we'd walk without saying a word for half an hour. Just footsteps and sea breeze. She liked to hum when the sun hit the water a certain way. I liked to listen. I started hanging some of my photos in the gallery. At first, I didn't want my name on them, but she insisted. Not because she thought the name mattered, but because she believed I did. The first piece that sold was a long shot of the coast at dusk, barely lit, almost shadowed out. It sold to a tourist from Denver who said it felt like the way grief should look. I almost laughed at how accurate that was. One evening, a local paper reached out to interview Marin about the gallery's growing attention. She casually mentioned me in the article just as Trent, a coastal photographer rediscovering his lens. That phrase stayed with me. I wasn't someone rebuilding after being broken. I was someone rediscovering. That one word made all the difference. But of course, life doesn't hand out clean breaks. About a month after that article ran, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't, but I did. It was Qley's mother. I hadn't spoken to her since before I left. She didn't even know where I'd gone. I still remember her voice, always warm, even when Qley and I were fighting. But now that warmth was gone. Now it was flat, cracked. She told me Qley had been in an accident. A single car crash on a rainy highway. Nothing fatal. No major injuries, but something about it shook her. "She's not well," her mother said. "She's unraveling. She's talking about you a lot, like she still expects you to come back." I asked as calmly as I could, "Why are you telling me this?" Her answer, "Because she still thinks there's hope, and someone needs to tell her the truth." I didn't respond right away. There was a time in my life where that would have broken me, where I would have packed a bag, gotten in the car, showed up at her hospital bed to hold her hand and tell her I forgave her. But that man was gone, and I had no interest in resurrecting him. So I said what needed to be said. Then tell her I'm gone. Tell her I left for good. And this time, I'm not looking back. Her mother didn't argue. She just exhaled like a woman who knew she had tried and finally accepted there was nothing left to save. After the call, I sat outside for a long time watching the sea again. Marin came out eventually. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't press. She just sat next to me, pulled her knees to her chest, and leaned her head on my shoulder. We didn't talk because we didn't need to, because sometimes peace is just knowing that someone is next to you. Not to fix you, not to explain your past, but to share your now. A full year had passed since I left my old life behind. A year since I watched everything crumble. Since the betrayal that tore me open and the silence that followed. But it wasn't the betrayal that defined me. It wasn't the anger or the pain or even the long walks by the sea trying to remember how to breathe again. It was something smaller, quieter, but more permanent. The day I stopped needing answers, the day I stopped needing closure. Maren and I never had a moment where we officially said we were together. There was no grand confession, no sweeping romantic gesture. It just happened naturally, authentically, like two rivers eventually finding a shared path to the ocean. She never asked me about the scars I carried, and I never had to explain why some nights I couldn't sleep or why I sometimes flinched at soft things. She saw me, not the version of me I'd been forced to become, the overachiever, the people-pleaser, the fixer, but the man who simply wanted peace. One afternoon as we walked the shoreline, she reached for my hand. That was it. No fanfare, no expectations, just that small human gesture that said, "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. The art gallery hosted a private exhibit a few weeks later, a showcase of local coastal photography. Maren insisted on including a series of my new work, quiet portraits of the cliffs, the tides, the moments between the waves. One of them, a simple shot of footprints in the sand being washed away, sold for more than I ever expected. The woman who bought it told me it made her feel like she could finally forgive someone. I smiled and said nothing because it had already done that for me. I didn't hear from Qley again. Not after her mother's call. No more emails. No sudden knock on the door. Maybe she understood now. Maybe the silence was her way of letting go, too. Or maybe she still imagined a version of me stuck in the past, waiting for her in some frozen moment that would never thaw. Either way, it didn't matter. One Sunday morning, Maren and I sat on the steps of her gallery with coffee, watching the fog roll in over the water. She turned to me and said, "If you could go back, would you change anything?" It was a question I'd asked myself 1,000 different ways. But this time I finally had the answer. "No," I said. "I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't be here." She nodded, smiled gently, and leaned into me. That was the moment I knew. Not just that I'd survived, not just that I'd moved on, but that I was home. Not in a place, not in a person,